Can they join by phone, by any other means?
I'll start working on that.
Okay, so he will start first and then we'll take it from there. If they come in, they'll speak.
So I've started the webinar. I'm making you the host. There are about 7 participants who have joined. And so you keep them busy while I try to see, yeah. So now you're the host.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so
yeah. Okay.
About 15 people have joined already as participants.
Okay,
so yeah.
We'll start.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this very important webinar. This is, for me, at this time, a very, very topical issue. With COVID, we have a lot of non-pharmaceutical intervention. The topic of this webinar is classification of medical devices, regulatory imperative. And we've lined up 3 strong speakers, both from the industry side and from the regulatory side. So without much ado, I would like to introduce the first speaker who will start. The other speakers can join us later on, but right now we have the first one to go on. This topic will be handled by a NAFDAC staff, a very distinguished one at that. Okay, so our first speaker is going to be Mr. Aino Olubenga, who is an assistant director in NAFDAC, Department of Biologics, Vaccines, and Medical Devices. So he's a very experienced person in regulating this particular field. He's a World WHO focal person on in vitro diagnostics. He's a member of Toastmasters International Club. He's a family man. He has traveled a lot, and he's very well versed in this topic. So Wenga, I will let you go on. A few housekeeping issues. I think we should focus on, our questions will come at the end of this, of the 3 topics. So, but if you want, you can actually send your question by chat box, and then we'll take it from there. Otherwise, you can send us your question at the end of the webinar or the topic by raising your hand. I will acknowledge you to speak. Mr. Wenga, can you take the floor? Do you have your slides? I want me to share it for you.
You can share it, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, my prof. Thank you very kindly. Thank you, Mr. Sholari, for this opportunity to share with you my reflections and my thoughts. I want to thank everyone this afternoon for joining us. I think this is a very great initiative. I'm so excited that we're beginning to see a semblance of a handshake across all the stakeholders in the industry, across the industry, the academia, and even regulatory. And I think this is a good one. It will further enhance our knowledge base and to allow for information sharing. So it's a very good one, and I welcome this great idea. Can I have my slide shared on the screen?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Just a minute.
I handle the biologics, vaccines, and medical devices registration of NAFDAC. But this afternoon, we'll be talking more on medical devices. The world of medical devices, which is very, very interesting. Okay.
Sorry, I think that was the wrong slide. Just a minute.
Okay, sir. So I applaud everyone who has supported this great idea.
Sorry. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Is that showing?
Yes, it's showing now.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, so the topic of today's discourse is classification of medical devices, a regulatory imperative. And of course, you know, NAFDAC is the regulatory body in Nigeria for not just medical devices, but food, drugs, cosmetics, and a whole lot. And we actually have this legal framework because of this, next slide, sir, because of the, yes, the outline is NAFDAC itself, functions of NAFDAC, definitions of medical devices, classifications, and approval processes. All right, sir. Then, of course, it's the enabling law. Next slide, sir. Next slide. Yeah, the agency actually was established by Decree number 15 of 1993, which was later amended by Decree 19 of 1999, and now NAFDAC, National Agency for Food, Drug, and Meat Control, Act Cap N1 Laws of the Federation of Nigeria, 2004. And it's basically the mandate is to regulate and control the manufacture, importation, exportation, distribution, advertisement, sale, and use of food, drugs, cosmetics, and medical devices, packaged water, chemicals, detergents. Collectively, they are called regulated products.
Bluetooth
Next slide,
mode.
next slide. So, regulate control. Use of food, drugs, medical device, regulated products in general. You can see that it's a whole large and very broad mandate for the agency. Each of these items are very major items that we use almost on a daily basis. So we have to pronounce on the quality, safety, and efficacy of products after appropriate analysis and reviews. We are to undertake the registration of food, drugs, cosmetics, medical devices, bottled water, chemicals, and reagents. In this case, you know, in this case of medical devices, to be quality, safety, and efficiency, or performance, if you like. You know, in one of the attributes of medical devices is QSP, quality, safety, and performance. And our definition of medical devices is we are going to draw from the global definition of WHO, IMRDF, International Medical Devices Regulators Forum, where WHO is an observer. We rely basically on IMDRF. We use a whole lot of their materials to develop our regulatory framework. So medical devices means any instrument, apparatus, implement, I'm sure we all know this, machine, appliance, implant, reagents for in vitro use, software, material, and other similar or related articles intended by the manufacturer to be used alone or in combination for human beings for one or more of their specific medical purposes, diagnosis, prevention, monitoring, treatment, and alleviation of diseases, blah, 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 like that. I'm sure we all know what all this is about. But basically, it's a clause that must be highlighted. What qualifies it to be a medical device is the fact that it must not have a pharmacological, immunological, or metabolical effect on the body. It's purely mechanical. That's how medical devices are. Okay, next slide, sir. Definition of medical devices. So this here we have actually streamlined this large definition into just about 3 or 4 lines as any instrument, apparatus, or contrivance, including components and accessories thereof, manufactured, sold, or advertised for internal or external use in the diagnosis, treatment, mitigation, or prevention of any disease, disorder, or abnormal physical state. So we domesticated that broad IMDRF definition. The outcome of the definition is the functionality of the product is not a deciding factor, but the intended use by the manufacturer, and this is very key. What actually qualifies an object or whatever, or a product to be called a medical device is the intended use and the mode of action. Those two operative phrases are very important. The intended use and mode of action. That's what we use to classify medical devices. To call a product a medical device. It is irrelevant whether the manufacturer classifies the product as a medical device or not. What is important is those two things that I mentioned, the intended use and the mode of action. Yes, medical device classification. According to the IMRDF principles of classification, regulatory control should be proportional to the level of risk associated with the medical device. Yes, of course. The higher the risk, the more the regulatory controls that are applied. The lower the risk, the lower the regulatory controls. The level of regulatory control will increase to the effect or to the degree of the risk associated with that, with the use of the product. The imposition of regulatory control should not place an unnecessary burden on regulators or manufacturers. Yes, it should make life as easy as possible, both for the manufacturers and also for the regulators. And that's why we need to, that's why a forum like this is very good for us to share knowledge and share ideas. We can borrow from each other and use that to leverage our operations. So we must find the easiest and the best means to apply regulatory controls that will not be too stringent or too burdensome on our applicants or manufacturers. And at the end of the day, it boils down to the accessibility of the products in the market. So that is very key. There's a need to classify medical devices based on their risk to patients, users, and other persons. Next slide, sir. Medical device classification. The risk presented by a particular device depends substantially on its intended purpose and the effectiveness of the risk management techniques applied during design use. Yes, it is during the designing of the medical device and the manufacture that you carry out the risk-benefit ratio and all that. You look at the level of risk inherent in it, and also from there now pronounce on the use and all that. The risk presented by a device depends in part on its intended use, the technology, and the mode of operation. Regulatory authorities should establish a device classification system consisting of 4 classes, where Class A represents the lowest hazard and Class D are the highest. Yes. Next slide, sir. Okay. So like I said, basically we rely a lot on IMDRF classification and their workings. So depending on which country, there are different countries have a way of classifying, but at the end of the day, they are all speaking to the same. They're all speaking to the same thing. They're all singing the same hymn sheet. If US FDA, I know US FDA, they have 3 classifications. They have Class 1, Class 2A, Class 2B, and Class 3. But IMRDF, which is the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, which also includes US, Europe, Australia, Japan, and WHO as an observer. They have 4 classifications. That's Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, Class 4. And that's what we are using in the agency presently. Class 1, of course, is the low risk level. And these are simple devices whose potential risk of illness or injury are very low to the patient. Examples, your plaster, adhesive plaster, your crib bandage, POP, or even diapers or wipes. All those are classified as low risk because they constitute very low hazard to the users. And of course, this low risk is such that it's almost everybody can use that. They are simple devices that everybody can. It doesn't require any expertise to use all those class one medical devices. Class 2. They are moderate risk. And so we are graduating again. You know, I told you that it's the level, the degree of risk that determines the class. So moderate risk presents a moderate risk associated with the usage, and for which general controls, general registration requirements are not sufficient to provide reasonable assurance for their safety and effectiveness. Thus, additional information, special controls may be required. And examples are your scalpels, your surgical gloves, your disposable syringes, auto-disabled syringes, and all that. This, you know, at this level, you're not talking of having a professional to administer, to use those medical devices, you know, like in this level, the level of risk is higher. You have to talk about sterility. So for example, like an agency will have to demand for sterility certificates and all that. You know, these products are sterile because like syringes, scalpels, they are all invasive products, and their sterility must be guaranteed. So we apply more regulatory controls for that. Level 3, you graduate again to a high risk, and that presents potentially high risk to users because the general and special controls are not sufficient to provide reasonable assurance on their safety and effectiveness. So at this point, we have to apply or ask for more documentation, more requirement is needed here to be able to license or give marketing authorization for such products. And examples are things like bloodline, hemoflow kits, enteral, HIV test kits, malaria test kits, ultrasound gel, and some RDTs also. RDTs in this area. So all those fall under class 3, high risk. Then of course the highest is class 4, which is the very high risk medical devices. And they pose the highest risk to patients. They are classified under the category because we may not really have sufficient information or technical information to determine their safety and effectiveness. I know at this level you have things like the life support system machines, your heart valve, your linear accelerators, your SAMDs, health information management systems, and all that. That's the highest level of this thing. So the regulatory control is very critical at that point. And medical device classification, so under the regulatory pathway that we apply for low is general control. You know, general control, we basically administrative requirements, laboratory analysis, and at times where possible, we even may not require laboratory analysis. The good news is that the agency is now going into risk-based sampling. And so in no distant time, for low risk, you may not even be going to the lab, may not be taking our samples to the lab again. We are going to apply risk-based sampling using the risk-based quadrant. So it's going to be very minimal regulatory control at this point. Most times we may not even require inspection for some of them. In some climes, in some other regions, like I know in USA, America, they really don't regulate things like medical devices and all that. What they do majorly is to apply PMS, post-marketing surveillance. So we are moving towards that direction. Then for moderate, we will have general and special controls. Like I said, the level of labeling requirement is higher here. The registration document is also will demand sterility certificate, and all that is laboratory analysis, and inspection must be done for moderate risk. Then of course for high risk, it's the same requirement, but you now have in addition, you may be asking for things like your dossier. You want to have a dossier assessment, the inspection report, and all that must be done. Then for the very high risk, can I go back one more slide, sir? Yes, for the very high risk, of course, special general controls, special controls, dossier, all the technical documents that will be asking for your inspection and everything. You know, at this point, you start asking for documents like your ISO certification, especially if you have ISO 13485, which is the medical devices ISO 20, I think the latest is 2016. Such documents will help us in reviewing your application. ISO 9001, 2015 or so. Those documents, I start asking for such documents at this point. Your CE mark, if it's a novel product, you need to furnish us with your clinical evaluation and statistical data, so performance evaluation, statistical data, and so many other documents. So that's the meat of the presentation. That's really the way we classify medical devices, and those are the regulatory controls that we apply. These are just examples of class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4 devices. In recent times, we have been dealing seriously with COVID-19 products. And actually, my division has actually been the headquarters of COVID-19 products in the agency. We have been doing a whole lot since the outbreak of the pandemic. I've been registering a lot of sanitizers, a lot of face masks, a lot of PPEs, a lot of RDTs, and IgG, IgGMs, antibody antigen test kits, and all that. So we've been doing a whole lot of activities in this under this COVID-19 pandemic, and I think we have been dealing with it to the best of our abilities. Next slide, sir. All right, so as I begin to wrap, significance of classification. Classifying medical devices based on their risk is essential for maintaining patients and staff safety while simultaneously facilitating the marketing of medical products. We must do everything possible to ensure accessibility of these products and the market, and not and help help our manufacturers and marketers to get these products to the market as seamlessly and as easy as possible. By establishing different risk classification, low risk devices, for example, stethoscope or tongue depressor, are not required to undergo the same level of testing the higher risk devices. That much has been said. Establishing a hierarchy of risk classification allows regulatory bodies to provide flexibility when reviewing medical devices. Last slide, sir. Okay, so for example, when we're talking of class 3, class 2, we might require that one of the regulatory controls is that they must have all these symbols. Their labeling requirements must be very, very explicit. For example, things like symbols of manufacturer, manufacturing dates, lot number, production date, expiry date, sterility, disposability, and all that must be clearly stated. We must check all this in total. So here, finally, is our registration flow diagram. For those who have been interfacing with NAFDAC, this is not new. You start, the cycle is very straightforward. The first thing you do is your application submission. Like I said, good news again is that the agency has now gone fully digital. Our applications have gone e-applications. We now have a platform for doing that, which is called the NAPAMS. NAPAMS, where you now submit online. So from the comfort of your home and from any part of the world, you can submit an application. You don't need to come physically. Again, we don't allow physical submission anymore. It's now purely online, and it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. 2 is the documentation. So when you submit to us, documentation verification, we'll do all that. From there, we'll go to issue you an import permit or a compliance directive, as the case may be. Then then you bring your sample, we'll take it to the laboratory for laboratory testing or analysis. Then, of course, GMP inspection, good manufacturing practice must be carried out on the facility. And then after that, we compile all that and we now have products to be presented at the sub-FDRC committee. We have a committee that reviews products for registration. So these products are now presented and they are reviewed, and from there moves on to the final product. And when it gets at this point, at number 6, it gets recommendation. At number 7, it gets approval, and that's the end of the process. And then it comes back to us, and we now issue the marketing authorization or a license. Very seamless, very easy and straightforward. So by and large, in summary, that pretty much summarizes what we do at this end on medical devices. I want to thank everyone for listening, and I thank the organizers and TORAP for this great and huge opportunity. Over to you, Prof. Many thanks, sir.
Thank you so much, Wenga, for this explosive presentation, taking us through different classification and the pathway. I think this is really exciting. Personally, I've learned so much in this 30 minutes presentation. Without much ado, we have 2 more presenters. So Wenga has taken it from the point of view of a regulator. We're going to have look at it from the point of view of industry, really, those who use this in the field, who go to register with NAFDAC. I don't know whether we have Ms. Besta around now.
It's still pending.
Still pending. Okay, while we wait for her to come in, we're going to start answering questions and asking questions to Wenga while we wait for the other participants to present their own. So Wenga, I have a few questions for you on the chat box. Meanwhile, anybody ready to ask a question can let me know, but better to put on the chat box.
I'm chatting him off now.
Now, Wenga, the first question is from Povesh.
I'm ready.
He's asking ultrasound gel and ECG gels. Why do they fall under? This is a classification. Thank you.
Ultrasound falls under class 3, yes, class 3. Class 3, yes, class 3. They are high risk. They are high risk medical devices. Because they must come under that so that the regulatory control can be very serious. Because these are devices that you cannot afford to take any chances with. You must, like ultrasound, this thing. If you give a wrong diagnosis, it can cause a serious. It can even cause. It can cause more damage than. So they fall under high risk. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
3.
Before we ask you more questions, I think one of the presenters is ready. Mr. Uyi Ehato is ready for his presentation. So let me introduce Uyi. Uyi is a renowned player in this industry. So he's been currently a senior regulatory affairs consultant for Savente Consulting Limited. Uyi has been in this field for a while. So I will let him handle this. Uyi, when you are ready to give us your, or just signify why we introduce you. Is he ready?
Yes, Uyi is ready.
Uyi is ready. So let's keep compiling our questions. After this presentation, we can go back to the different topics. Uyi, can you go ahead? You want to share slides and go on.
Okay, I'll be sharing my screen. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Okay.
Enable open lists.
Okay. Prof, please share my slides. I think.
Try now, see what it works. I've enabled you. Try now.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, can you see my slide?
Yes, you can. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Mr. Aina Lugbenga, for that wonderful presentation. My name is Uye Hatazi, as introduced. I've been in regulatory for the past 6 years. Currently, I work with Savante as the Senior Regulatory Affairs Consultant. In the course of my career, I've had privilege of registering medical devices, drugs in Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast, and Kenya. So the next slide, okay. Yeah. So this is a little bit of my background. Then an overview of today's presentation. We will look at the NAFDAC's definition for medical device as compared to the Global Harmonization Task Force. A big thank you to Mr. Gbenga. He has already done justice to that. What I will be doing when we get to that slide is just highlighting some differences between the definitions. Then we will take, I will share my experience using 3 case studies. Using 3 case studies of my experience I've had with NAFDAC, we will compare to what Mr. has shared with us. Finally, we will look at the benefit of actually having a classification system while you're preparing for registration of your products. So basically, this is the definition Mr. Gbenga has presented earlier. The definition by NAFDAC is to the left, and the definition by the Global Harmonization Task Force, which is a body of professionals globally harmonizing the regulation of medical devices, is on the right-hand side of your screen. As you can see, I've highlighted some spots as yellow. Basically, just to point out that the Global Harmonization Task Force specifically mentioned some things which are most times borderline issues when you are classifying medical devices. Things like reagent for in vitro use and software specifically. Then also for the intended purpose of a medical devices. In addition to the definition NAFDAC has defined in their NAFDAC Act, it also pointed out devices that are used for contraception and also things that could serve as disinfection, either for general disinfection or for medical device purpose. And as he pointed out, I have a device that falls into all this category, but the caveat there is the primary intended purpose of that medical device must not be achieved either through pharmacological means, immunological means, or metabolic means. And if you look at the NAFDAC's definition, it doesn't really capture this caveat. From my experience, we have products that are borderline. Yes, they can ensue pharmacological effects to an extent. Will they still fall under medical devices? The next slide. So I'm taking the discussion from the point of view of registering a medical device in Nigeria. On this slide, you can see the sets of administrative documents you are actually expected to submit while preparing for the registration of a medical device. These documentation requirements are publicly available on the NAFDAC website. As you can see, I just want to point out something quickly. On the power of attorney, one of the caveats for NAFDAC is it must be valid for at least 5 years, signed and notarized by a notary public in the country of origin. Most people make this mistake of signing power of attorney of 2 years, 3 years, and they end up going back and forth, getting different compliance directive from NAFDAC. On the next slide, you can see an highlight of the 3 products I'll be talking about. The first product is the EGM 1000. The second product will be the menstrual cup, and the third product will be a cryptococcal antigen test kit. I chose these 3 sets of products. They are uniquely different. Their intended use is different, and the level of technology involved in the 3 of them, it's different, from very simple technology and very simple use to a very complex and complicated use, such as having to calibrate a device before use. So the first case scenario, which I'll be sharing, is the EGM 1000. Basically, the EGM 1000 is a glucose monitoring device, but in this case, it's non-invasive. It takes glucose reading. It takes the blood glucose level using employing the ultrasound technology, electromagnetic technology, and thermal measurement. As you could see in slide 5, while we were registering this product, we put together those sets of 11 documents and we submitted to NAFDAC because the NAFDAC guideline only prescribed those sets of documents. But in the process of registration of these documents, we encountered challenges such as the agency requesting for additional information on validation of our software, evaluation performance of the device, and comparative evaluation of this device. Comparative evaluation simply means comparing your EGM 1000 as a glucose monitor with other well-established glucose monitors. Fortunately for us, we envisaged this might come up in the process of the registration. So we had already requested this information from the manufacturer, and submitting this information to the agency, the product was accessed and given approval. So for those of us who have the intention of bringing novel technologies such as this, please bear these at the back of your mind. Yes, there will be, you will be asked for additional information, information on device performance and evaluation, comparative evaluation, and etc. Then the second case study is the menstrual cup. The menstrual cup is just a plastic cup made of rubber and silicone, which ladies wear to collect their menstrual discharge instead of using the conventional sanitary pad. So this was a product we didn't really envisage much challenge because of the simplicity of use and minimal risk involved. But on submission of all application documents, successful laboratory analysis, only to get to the point of the final approval meeting, we were issued a compliance directive. What was it all about? We were asked to provide evidence that this product is safe for use in human. We didn't see this coming, but luckily for us, the manufacturer already has these studies prepared, which they provided, and we submitted to the agency, and also we had our approval granted. Then the final product case study here is a cryptococcal antigen test kit. Basically, it's an immunoassay dipstick test kit that detects the antigen for Cryptococcus species in either serum, whole blood, or cerebrospinal fluids. Yes, this was one product. We knew, yes, we were going to have lots of challenge. Aside the administrative document, we knew we would need what they call a dossier. But the challenge we had is no documentation from NAFDAC guided us on the level and the type of information that needed to be provided for the evaluation of test kits of this nature. In order to play it safe, what we did was we just had to default to the Global Harmonization Task Force documentation required, known as the Summary of Technical Documents. And on that document, the list of informations to be provided is clearly stated. So we followed the recommendation. We submitted this dossier in that format to NAFDAC, and fortunately for us, we were given approval for this product also. Now, in all this,
can you mind finishing in next 3 minutes so that?
Okay, I just have 2 more slides to round up. Yeah, in all of these, I want to emphasize that NAFDAC GMP was mandatory. In the past, NAFDAC used what they call the risk-based approach. You had 4 categories under the risk. Category 1 and 2 were good to go because they are considered as low-risk sites, either because they have 2 successful NAFDAC GMP inspection or an inspection by SRO such as WHO or FDA or any SRO in the ICH member committee. But as of 2020, NAFDAC standpoint on GMP now is every applicant must pay the GMP inspection fee, and you can see the figure on my slide there. Now, in all of this, all of my experience, there are two questions that I have had in mind, which we have not been able to resolve. For devices involving softwares and algorithms, such as the EGM 1000, softwares will be upgraded, algorithms will change. When this happens, how do we handle these changes? What level of information would the agency require us to provide? We haven't gotten clarity in areas like this. Do we just keep mute when such changes happen and keep marketing our product? But we know these are not the best practice. Hopefully in the future, the agency will be able to provide clarity in this area. And also monitoring of these devices once they're on the market. We don't have clarity on the level of information we need to submit or the informations we need to monitor. And so a classification system, if we had one, can help us in this regard because it will already establish the level of information required. And also other things like the essential documents required to be provided by manufacturers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Uyi. This is a very exciting one from industry perspective. Before we get back to you, Mbenga, I would like to let Ms. Besta Avanti Govanda Besta from South Africa. She's the Director of Regulatory Affairs for Beton Dixon in South Africa. So do you mind stopping the share of your screen so that she can share hers?
Okay, let me.
By 5, so let's see whether she can finish on time. Maybe 1 or 2 questions for her before we continue. Thank you. As we wait for Wenga, just to say that Ms. Besta holds a bachelor degree in pharmacy from University of Witwatersrand, South Africa, and a master's degree from Barcelona School of Management. She has been in this business for a while, so we're going to excited to share to see her own insights on this. Are you able to disable your screen?
Just a minute.
No, he's a host.
Okay. Good. Okay, wonderful. So Ms. Besta is here. Please go on, Ms. Besta. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Will you let me know when you have my screen? I'm not sure if it's sharing or not.
Yes, it is. It is.
Yes, I can see your screen, Avanti.
Thanks all. And apologies, it is a bank holiday in South Africa, so I've got children running around, dogs. I hope the background noise is not too much for everyone with our work from home arrangements at the moment. Okay, thanks for having me. And I hope to take a step back and look at the classification from a global perspective. I hope not to be repetitive. I hadn't had a chance to attend the whole session due to technical difficulties, but let's see how it goes. As mentioned, I am the Regulatory Affairs Manager for Africa for Becton Dickinson. We're a fairly large company with a massive portfolio of IVDs and medical devices, and I'm responsible for that portfolio in Africa. But I'm also the chairperson of the MedTech Industry Association called SAMED for Southern Africa. And I wanted to give you just a perspective on the classification from a global structure and how it works. Let's see if this works. I'm going to try and change, and hopefully, has my slide changed?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So the principles, and I hope the slides will be shared. I have given you some references at the bottom. And in all my time, I've seen there's 2 ways that countries go, either the IMDRF version or the EU and US version. So I'm going to discuss both, and over the next few slides, you'll see that I will compare the 2, because depending on the country you go to, including in Africa, one or the other is used. But the principles are generally the same. And the basic principles for classification is that we look at the risk to patient, as well as the risk to users or other persons. And that is the basic principle of any classification system that is used throughout the world. The basic principle also should be, not always is, that we want regulatory authorities to harmonize their classification system. and not for ease for manufacturers, and not because it's a better system, but because if you classify things the same, then as a manufacturer, the information you need to gather from a clinical and manufacturing perspective is the same. So those are the two basic principles. And I think if you go globally, across Asia Pacific or the LATAM countries, this remains the principles that the regulators try and stick to. I'll start with a system that is the IMDRF version. And here you find classes A, B, C, and D, starting from a low risk all the way to a high risk. And as I mentioned before, it's usually risk to person, but as well as risk to the public or any other person. And there are some examples on the extreme right-hand side. So you start off with the low risk as your A's and the high risk as your D's. As a complexity, the EU, as you would know, in 2017, changed their regulations to ensure that they have more oversight on medical devices. So what you see is a system that they've put into place, and that is, and I'm not sure if you see my pointer, they have the class 1, 2A, 2B, and 3 system for medical devices. And in the IVDs, they stuck to the A, B, and C, D system of the IMDRF. Again, this moves an increasing risk as what is a class 1, a very low risk device, and you move on to 2A, 2B, and class 3, where it becomes an increased risk to person and public, but also requires more regulatory oversight. And this applies to both medical devices and the IVDs. I thought out of interest, I'd show you what the Canada, USA, EU, and Australia does. They all use the class 1, 2, 3, and 4 system. And you'll notice that the USA has a slight difference, is that their class 1s actually group the 1 and 2s together that you see in the EU or Australia or Canada. And as I mentioned before, with increased risk does come increased data requirements or regulatory oversight. I wanted to spend some time to go into what the classification rules are. And these are pretty important because across the world, you can't just classify a device. You actually have a whole lot of rules to follow. And with the EU MDR, the medical device regulations at CE mark products, they have 22 rules for products. And it makes it really easy for manufacturers to apply these rules to their products. The IMDRF has rules 1 to 16. They are similar, but the IMDRF has condensed it. As a matter of interest, most African countries tend to follow the IMDRF rules of 1 to 16 rather than the EU 1 to 22. I thought out of interest to the group, I would also just focus on what these rules are. If you look at non-invasive, for example, these devices do not touch the skin, do not touch the patient, and only contact skin which is intact. I thought I'd focus on rules 1 to 3. It's the most simplest of medical devices, and that's the non-invasive ones. And then you get a nice flow chart. So most organizations do this. You'll find it in IMDRF. This particular one I took out of the South African organization, but they're pretty much the same. If you look at rule 1 that I wanted to focus on, is the product in contact with injured skin, a mechanical barrier, and absorbs exudates? You have a choice, yes or no. If it's intended for wounds that breach the dermis, or is it intended to manage microenvironment of the wound? And in that case, you're either going to go to a class B or a class C. So not to go into too much detail, but every regulator will have rules and classification. So it makes it fairly easy for a manufacturer to say, okay, it's a class B or a class C. And the nice thing is all of these classification rules, flow charts, etc., are available so that the manufacturer doesn't have to guess, nor does the manufacturer have to rely on the regulator. And throughout the world, we all then have the same classification of these rules of medical devices. I'm going to further go down into what Rule 1 then says, because these are pages and pages of regulations, as you would imagine. A non-invasive device is then split into various things, and it tells you what a non-invasive device becomes as a class A and gives you some nice examples of pads, gauze, or dressings. A non-invasive device in class B, some examples would be hydrogel dressings, for example, or a non-invasive device to be used for wounds that have breached the dermis. And that means you make it a classification C, or in the EU, for example, classification 2. So in conclusion, the classification is based on the intended use of the device. And what's important is that a manufacturer will look at a device and say, what does it do? Let's go to the flow chart. Let's look at the classification rules. And quite easily, I must say, as a manufacturer, you'll be able to then put your classes into A, B, C, or D, or 1, 2A, 2B, and 3, as you would require, depending on the jurisdiction. The last thing, the second thing is the risk to patient and risk to other persons is considered. So unlike pharma, where it's very sort of simpler, I think, here they look at a risk factor. Is it going to be risky to the person? But also, is the result of what you are doing risky to the rest of the population? I think this is fairly important, particularly in Africa, because we have seen this, that countries may diverge from harmonized classification depending on public health circumstances. So I'll use the example of HIV, for example, being in South Africa, is that an HIV instrument or analysis may not be a high risk in a European country. But in a country where HIV is a very big public health concern, again, I'll take South Africa as an example, we will put that as high risk. A very good example is also the COVID test that we've all seen so many of. In some countries, the COVID test may, by classification or by flow chart, have been an A, B, or C. But because of the public health risk, most jurisdictions have put all COVID tests into the class D or class 3 scenario. And lastly, just to say that as you increase the risk from A to D or 1 to 3, you have more requirements of data, and that's clinical data, biocompatibility, clinical studies that you might have done. And certainly, we need more stringent regulatory requirements as you go up in your classes. And I put in brackets there because that's fair and reasonable, is that almost all countries globally give you a higher fee for evaluating or processing those products that in a higher class or higher classification. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Avanti. I think this is an exciting topic. We've handled it from three different points of view: a regulator's point of view given by Wenga, industry point of view by UI, and also view further international perspective by Avanti. And I'm sure all the audience will agree with me that this cannot be more timely. At this point in time, with the advent of COVID pandemic, this topic needs to be really understood much better and see how we can, because as you can imagine, a lot of non-pharmaceutical intervention will be applied going forward until this COVID is contained. So without spending more time on this, I want to throw it open to the audience. Any question you have? We want to focus more with Avanti since she has some time constraints. So if you have a question for her, please help us put it on the Q&A section. Let me check and see the first person. While we wait for a specific question for Avanti, I want to just read the ones that are available right now. This one is coming from Povesha. What are the documents required for registration of PPE, N95 mask, 3-ply mask, etc.? If they have international accreditation such as ISO, CE, and NIOSH, do we still need factory approvals? Who can go for this? I think this is more for Wenga.
Yes, this is for NAFDAC.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. PPEs, all these COVID products, we have actually done a bit of them this period. So basically, like I said, they will have administrative documents, and of course, they will have technical documents to support it. So technical documents like we want to see if they have like if it's a company that has like ISO certifications. We want to see the ISO certifications. We want to see their certificate of analysis if they have one. We want to see things like their filtration, their level of filtration, their technical documents that we have listed on our website. Those are the documents we require for PPE. Then in terms of the inspection, like somebody has asked, we at this point, what we're doing is virtual inspection. So we just we ask for your documents, we review it, and when we need virtual inspections, we ask you. We have a division that handles inspections in the agency. So they have their requirements, and they will conduct their reviews, and from there we can now progress to registering the device. So pretty much that's the way that we're handling it.
Let me just further ask, how do you conduct your virtual inspection? Just for the audience to know, what do you exactly do?
Virtual, like we ask for, you give us pictures of the facility, there are essential areas, equipment, and other things that we would like to see. You first of all give us the picture, you give us the documentation, we review, and probably schedule a virtual inspection where we now see those things physically, and we ask questions with the personnel on ground. So it's basically like you are showing what you have already submitted, what we have already seen in your physical submission. We now see it live, and we're asking you questions. You are taking us moving. We are moving live. We are seeing it live. We are moving from one spot to another, one part of the factory, the facility, another. We're asking questions. We can even ask you to operate, run a process, and we'll see. And it's a digital world, really.
Sorry, I have a lot of questions for you, so I will keep that. But other panelists can also chime in as we speak, instead of just focusing on Wenger. Now, this question is just trying to say, is ultrasound gel, is it a medical device? And if so,
sure.
How is it right?
Yes, it is. It is.
Okay, good.
It's a level 3 medical device. I've said it much earlier.
Okay, great. Now, this is from Charles Asman. It says, is the risk categorization scheme not applicable anymore, even for low-risk medical devices? And is it now mandatory for all imported medical devices to undergo overseas inspection, GMP inspection, before approval is granted?
Like I said, that what we do is mostly desk review at this point, especially under this pandemic. We've been doing desk review where we ask you to bring technical documents and we review it. And when there's an essential need for virtual inspection, we call for that. But when you submit some technical documents, we know the kind of document that we require, and that will help us to carry out some assessments of what you have. For example, like I said, we have it's a company that if your product is coming from an SRA, it gives us some level of confidence. If you are coming from an SRA country, EU, America, and all that, and if it's a non-SRA country, that's the WHO calls it the rest of the world, like Asia, China, and all that, we might be asking for more stringent requirements like that. So those are the things that we consider, and also, of course, your ISO certification, your CE mark, your NIOSH, NEBOSH, and all that. All those things we look at for assessing your application.
Now, for the members of the audience, I want to know, if you have a class 1 medical device,
yes.
Do you need to do all those? I mean, what is the risk-based approach?
It's a minimal, class 1 is minimal. We just look at maybe you ask for the certificate of analysis, look at the product itself, assess the product, minimal labeling requirement and all that. So the regulatory control applied in class 1 is very minimal. We don't really need you to go for serious reviews like inspection and all that. We just look at the document, and we can even register you based on your documentation if we feel that the risk is very low. Something like toothbrush. Toothbrush is also Toothbrush is a medical device. It's a classroom medical device. We won't asking you to bring this, bring that, or something like toothbrush. Yes.
Thank you so much. Now, before we go further, are you still there? Can you share some of your experiences, in these past months, trying to register products with NAFDAC? I mean, is there any your own perspective that we need to share to the audience?
Okay. Pre-COVID and post-COVID registration of product with NAFDAC has strictly been online. We basically send emails, documentations via email. They have a portal, the NAPAMS portal, where your administrative documents, you scan and you upload. The portal is a means of communication between applicants and NAFDAC. They review your application. If there is a compliance directive, they issue it to you on that portal. You respond back to them and your product goes through the process. But as far as I know, I haven't really done any class 1 products. All the products I've been doing have gone to lab for analysis. And once your lab report is back and the approval meeting is concluded, they issue you your NAFDAC registration certificate. After the COVID period in June, July, yes, we've received at least 2 NAFDAC certificates online. We didn't have to go to the office. You just had to log in and print out your NAFDAC certificates.
Great, thank you so much. Now, Benga, another question for you. I want you to come in from time to time, even though it's for NAFDAC. This question is there any way to track the process of an application at its several stages of
yes. The NAPAMS platform is a very robust platform that you can take control. Actually, it gives you the control of your application. You can see different stages. He has used it before. You see different stages. When it's clients have called me and said that my application is they will tell me specifically the status of the application. They can assess the status of the application. If it's at import permit stage, you can see it. If it's at HOU stage, you can see it. So it gives you full control of your, unlike when we're doing manually, you cannot really tell where, but at this point you can specifically narrow your application down to where it is along the chain, along the track line of registration.
How does
Go on. No, go on.
How does the new NAPAMs you're using now, how does it impact on the timeline? I mean, can I say for sure?
Yeah, fantastic. It's a very professional platform that we have been using, and like I said, it's quite fast and it facilitates registration. Gone are those days when before you can submit an application, you need to come down to the office, and the situation in Lagos and all that, traffic and all that. So here, but from any part of the world, you can submit your application and we pick it up. That same, almost immediately, we pick up, once you log in and you upload your application, your document, we'll pick it up immediately and we'll start our work. And so it has really shortened the registration lifespan of our applications. It's really, not just for the applicants, for us also it has simplified our work. We really don't need to go into manual files and all that. That's really been a wonderful tool for us to use.
Wonderful. Any input from here?
Yes, from my own perspective, yes. For medical devices, yes, the time frame has improved a little bit. The processing time from vetting of documents to issuing of your import permits has shortened. But one big hurdle we still face is by the time we send samples for laboratory analysis, there's actually a huge gap. But immediately you get a notification that your product has been scheduled for approval meeting in 1 to 2 weeks, your final approval certificate is always ready on the portal. But the space for laboratory analysis is still a very huge gap for us at this point.
Wenga, this question for you. Now, you're doing a risk-based approach.
Yes.
Is it plan to bypass lab testing for some products?
Oh, yes. Risk-based analysis, which you have introduced, we started it and we have been using it. So it's basically to now streamline, like speaking to what we have said, it's going to streamline the number of products that we're going to be taking to the lab. And like I said, there's a risk-based quadrant that we're going to be using. It's based on products coming from SRA, the product itself, the country of origin and all. So by the time we put that together, a whole lot of, in fact, close to like, I'll say close to like 40–50% of what we used to take to the lab may probably no longer be necessary again. So once we just analyze, once we carry out that risk-based analysis, that immediately goes for your laboratory analysis. And so it progresses your application to the next level. And so an application that is meant to be like 90 days, we might now even be looking at about less than half of this thing. So no fears at all, no fears. That has been taken care of.
Thank you so much. This is so exciting. I feel we can stay here for just 1 hour, but to respect the time of other people, we may have to close it now. But before we close, I want to have a kind of final word from both of you. I mean, basically, this is an exciting topic and we can never finish. There are many questions they lined up here, which I don't think we need to continue, otherwise we'll not finish today. It shows that this is an exciting webinar, and we'll see how we can do more of this, really. Yeah. While you are closing, I want you to Wenga, to address this question somebody has put together here. It says that in the visibility of the process in NAPAMS, who has access to that? Is it just the pharmacists, or anybody in the company? I don't know. How do you answer that question? With this, give us a wrap up before we go to E. Thank you. Okay, to quickly address that question, you know, you have login details to the platform. It's not accessible to everybody. It's the company official that has the login details. So you must log in for you to be able to see the registration status. So it's a very confidential arrangement. It's not everybody that can see it. It must log in. If you have the password access, the code to log in, then that's why you can see it. So on the final note, I will say that the agency has really put in a whole lot of measures in place to make registration and marketing authorization very easy. The advent of NAPAMS and also this fixed base is really going to make life very easy for our applicants. Every day we are constantly innovating, constantly inventing and thinking of how to make this process very easy and as seamless as possible for our applicants. So I'm sure that most of our applicants, they are quite pleased with what we are doing. You know, unlike what it used to be 4 or 5 years ago, they are better acquainted to our processes. And I want to say that we're not going to stop at that. We'll continue to make it better and bigger as we go along. So it's going to be a win-win for both the regulators and the industry in a very short time. Thank you for the opportunity, sir. Can we hear from you? Final word.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Agbenga. In my closing remark, we in the industry, really, we are looking forward to a classification system soonest. It will help us understanding the level of documentation. It will help us when projecting the regulatory scenario for any product. We are better able to understand, oh, we will need lab analysis or we will need GMP inspection for this category of product. So we really look forward to a classification system published by the agency soonest. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think let me use the opportunity to thank everybody who has participated. For me, I'm so excited. I wish we can stay here for just 1 hour. A lot of things to ask, a lot of things to learn. We have so many questions coming up. Unfortunately, we cannot answer all of them because we have to go. We want to respect everybody's time because we're having this more often so that you come and see that we respect your time. I'm sure you can still engage with NAFDAC or with we or anybody on this topic as we go along. So this webinar is put together by the Organization of Regulatory Affairs Professionals, and I hope this is going to be happening more and more. And for me, a lot of learning. We are in a new era, post-pandemic. You know, this is a new normal. We cannot. It's what we are going to face. Really, I think as we move along, I'm sure more webinars of this form will come. We hope that it will be as exciting as this one. And also, Wenga, our gratitude to your agency. We hear what you are doing to advance regulatory in Nigeria. We hope it continues, and we hope to push you. And I'm sure UI from its own end, industry perspective, to keep raising the bar so that NAFDAC will keep improving. Thank you so much, everybody. Before I go, I want to say special thank you to Sholarin for making this happen, and really all of us who have attended. I can see that we have a lot of people who stay to the end. This is quite encouraging, and I'm hoping that more of this will happen. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Many thanks, sir. Many thanks, Prof.
Yeah.
Great one.
Bye-bye.
Great one.
Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Ina.
Oui, thank you. Yeah, thank you so kindly. Bye, Prof.
Bye.